In this video, we're going to go through some Visual Studio essential skills. Today, we're going to be working with the windows in Visual Studio. Here I have a project up, but what I'm going to do here is make sure that my windows are set to the default layout, just so that we can start from the same thing. And you can see the window at the bottom disappeared, and that looks like a bug in Visual Studio 2019. Restart the build, we'll get that window back. So now that my windows are up, we're going to start out with the basics. If you guys want to skip ahead in the chapters, check the chapters on the bar or on the side. The first tip's going to be, we're going to get line numbers showing up for any languages. The way you do this is go to Tools, Options, you can collapse environment, go to Text Editor, and then go to All Languages. So here there's a whole bunch of checkboxes, and you can see this is a box, meaning it's enabled for some languages but not all. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to double click that twice so it's a check mark. So then no matter which language I pull up, if it's HTML, JavaScript, XML, I'll always get my line numbers here. So I already had line numbers before, but now they should show up for any file that you pull up into Visual Studio. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is down at the bottom, there's this output window. And output actually has a drop down here that lets you see multiple things. So you can see tests, you can see source control, you can see package manager information. Now most of the time this is context sensitive and it'll just be on whatever you need. But if you ever do need to see something in the history or the tests, or it's just not the right window, you can change this anytime. You can also click this button here to clear it. So if you wanted to see the build, but you were getting some weird errors, you want to clear that out and retry it, you can just manage that here. So there's nothing else really too special down there with the output window, but that window does change when you actually get into the runtime, and we'll talk about that later. This is your main coding window. There's nothing too special about it, but in Visual Studio 2019, they did add this that lets you see the project you're working in, the class you're working in, and then what other functions or items are in that class, so you can kind of do a jump to where those items are added. The other thing that's kind of cool here is that there's an automatic code cleanup here, where if you just run this little paintbrush here by clicking on it, you can automatically run that code cleanup. But if you click this little arrow here, you can choose different things like how to configure that code cleanup. And these are the available fixes that you'll get if you do those. So things like formatting the document, removing unnecessary using statements, sort using statements. So if we just go up here, let's just edit this one really quick. So I moved XUnit to the top. When I click this, it automatically sorts those usings for me. The other thing you can see is your file size. So if you hold down Control and use the mouse wheel, you can usually zoom in or zoom out for that window. And that controls all the windows. And if you ever do that on accident because you're holding down Control and you use the mouse wheel, you can just come down here and put in 100, hit enter, and go back to whichever size you're comfortable with. But normally when you get multiple windows, sometimes you want to see two things at once. So the way you can do that here is you can grab the blue bars, and then when you hover over this one, it actually just puts it back to where it was at. When you hover over the one on the right, it'll create like a two-pane item, and if you click the one up above, it'll do above and below. So if you ever want to put that window back, you can just drop it back on this middle item again. So when you have a bunch of windows at the top, sometimes you want to be able to pin those to keep those where they're at so they don't keep moving around on you or doing something like this where they keep switching around. If your window is small enough, there'll be a drop-down list here where you can see all the windows you have open. But if you want a tab to always stay in a spot because you like it for some reason, you can just use this toggle pin, and that will pin it down into place. So you can see I toggled down position. If I toggle down this main window, it'll shoot over to the left. The pinned ones stay on the left, and then as you go through things, they kind of just pop up in whatever order that they showed up over here. So we showed how to move around a tab in a single window, but sometimes you want it to be in a different place. So there's another option that I haven't shown you yet, and that's that you can grab any one of these windows, and instead of going to any of these blue areas, you can actually just drop it somewhere, and now you have a completely new tab. And you could grab these, and you'd have to resize your window, but you can put those two tabs on top of each other. So if you have the tabs like this, you can then do the same thing where you can do a splitter. So when you do that, you can see you have two different windows. If you have multiple screens, you can have different work areas on different screens. So another neat thing you can do is there's the Server Explorer, which kind of gives you database information. And there's this toolbox. So if I want to put a new window in this toolbox and test explorers area, what I can do is I can open the toolbox, pin it for just a second. then go to Text Explorer, and I have this floating window. And floating windows, you can see, have a lot more options. So they have the same one with the middle, the split, the up, but you can also see that they go farther out. So if I do that, it creates a side-by-side window, but all these tabs stay over in this window. So if I would do this really quick here, you can see that now this work area is smaller and this is a completely separate work area, which is okay. But what I normally really want to do is I want to grab this one, hover over this one over here that I pinned, and then I can drop this in the center. And now when I unpin this one, you can see that my Test Explorer shows up here. So if I want my Test Explorer to show up, I can just pin it down. And now that's up all the time, so I can just keep running my unit test by clicking this button rather than trying to build and do something else to run my unit tests. So it's just an easy way that you can get your Test Explorer up all the time. And then down at the bottom, you can see that there's a toolbox, the Server Explorer, in this, but generally you only need one of those up at a time. So it's just a neat little tip you can do. So I'll hide that. And when hiding that, let's take a look over at the Solution Explorer, because you can see that the Solution Explorer does something similar, except for there's a Properties window that you can unpin. And that's kind of like what we were doing over here with these two windows. But if I go back to this Properties window and pin it, it goes back to the bottom here. And then we have Solution Explorer and Get Changes, which is just the source control window. That could be something different if you have TFS. But this Solution Explorer window, it has the Start Search up here. It has some other items. We can go into that in another video. But this is the Properties pane down here, which tells you your solution properties, your project properties. In WPF, this Properties window is actually the properties for whichever item you click on. So you can actually control a lot more down there too. But everything that we did over here works over here as well. If you unpin these guys, they kind of give you more workspace. Especially when you're in WPF, you have another window here that's your XAML, and you can adjust where that sits on your screen. You can pop that out or do other things with it. Go to like Analyze at the top, and different options are available at different levels of Visual Studio. You can see that there's code cleanup windows, there's code metric windows, and there's code metric results windows, and you can go in and play with those. But when you go to run your app, when you build, when you debug, when your app is in this running state, you can see that there's a call stack, there's binding failures, there's exception settings, there's a command window, an immediate window, and an output window. And that output window, again, has the same drop downs that we talked about before, so that you can, when you hit a breakpoint, you can see output or anything else you're doing at the time. And then over here we have autos. So what this does is it automatically pulls up values of items in scope for you. And then you can do watches where you can set custom values that you want to check the value of. But this is just the default. You can adjust these windows however you want to make your workspace work for you. But the big thing is that you have different options of windows. The most important part of this is that not that you have this layout with output and the autos, but that you can actually go to the debug and see that there's more windows that you can choose from. So if you close any of these windows for any reason, you can find them up in breakpoints, exception settings, output, binding failures, GPU threads, tasks, parallel stacks, parallel watch, and all the rest that are here. So if for any reason you lost a debug window, like if you wanted to find the diagnostics because you closed this window for some reason, you get back to that in this debug windows. The view list is another place you can go look to see what windows are available for you. So you can grab your Solution Explorer, Git repository, and a lot of these other windows that are kind of pinned by default. So you don't have to go reset to get everything back. You can just go up to this view menu, go to other windows, and you can see that there's other things like containers and web publish that if you need those windows, you can go grab those and get those back. I'm planning on doing a debugging video next to give you some more advanced tips on debugging.